Hi, this is your mini lecture for Chapter 8 of Understanding Business Ethics. In this chapter, we're looking at ethics and the environment. So, the natural environment or environment is actually another stakeholder. And remember, stakeholders are people, or in this situation, the earth, which is impacted by the decisions that businesses and organizations make. And so the resources that are used for manufacturing or energy used to run stores or plants, or all the waste that we use from packaging or just making products and services can be linked to our environment and obviously has an impact on our environment. So many organizations are now seeing our natural environment as a competitive advantage. Remember that a competitive advantage is something that one business or organization has or does that is better than their competitors. And it actually is hard for their competitors to copy them. And a competitive advantage usually leads to an increase in profits, an increase in customers, etc. So one of the ways that we're able to achieve a competitive advantage is to have make products or services and market products and services that are eco-friendly, so they're environmentally friendly. Another way is to increase efficiency, reduce waste, utilize less energy while we're producing in order to save costs as well. So there's four typologies. There's eco-efficiency, which looks at productivity measures. So how can I increase my productivity using more, use less electricity, using less environmental resources to do so. There's beyond compliance leadership, and this is demonstrating good practices to our stakeholders, saying, look, we are making a very conceited effort to be environmentally friendly. And one of the certifications that companies can seek if they are a very environmentally friendly company is to seek an ISO 14000 certification. And the ISO certifications is an external firm that looks at their main thing is quality, but they also have the 14000 series, which looks at environmentally friendly practices. Eco branding is using proactive environmental commitment to differentiate products and enable premium pricing. Um, you might see that if something's made with recycled materials, it might cost more, and businesses are able to charge more because they're marketing that, and people want to be friendly to the environment. And then environmental cost leadership is production innovations that enable cost productions, or product innovations that enable cost productions that enable us to achieve efficiencies and so forth, and different innovations that that we have. Here's an example, and you're actually going to read an article about this, but these are some of the most environmentally friendly products and brands in the world. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm sure you noticed some of them, or you know some of them. Voluntary environmental compliance is when a company says they recognize the importance of the environment to all stakeholders, um, and they're trying to establish environmental compliance systems. So, in order to do this, you have to have top management's commitment. You want to be very transparent and publicize your environmental policy, produce annual environmental reports, have metrics you're trying to achieve, implement an environmental focused system, and then have both internal and external environmental standards. So I'm sure you've heard that something is green, and this just means that you're trying to be environmentally friendly, or another term we use is sustainable. And so we might have to achieve um, or come up with a new strategy. And so this might be different product labeling and packaging, changes in our manufacturing processes to reduce waste, maybe it's to reduce pollution, more environmentally product development, and then using more environmentally friendly raw materials. So here's an example from the article you're going to read. This is the Green Toys. I'm sure if you have kids, you've seen them. So they take a milk, they use recycled products to come up to make their toys. So you have a milk carton, you recycle it, it gets ground into plastic pellets, and then it gets melted and made into these trucks. Another company you've probably heard of is Kohl's. Kohl, and I don't know if you've ever been in a Kohl's store, but they'll tell you how they design their buildings. And this is a sketch, and I know it's really fuzzy, but you can go look at it on the line if you want. And they develop their stores to be environmentally friendly, to utilize less energy so that they are greener. And some of the things they do are solar panels and different initiatives to try to reduce their carbon footprint or their impact on the earth. So, how do we come up and how do we adopt sustainability strategies throughout a firm? Well, first we have to develop our strategy and envision the future. Then we need to translate that strategy, and we might need to come up with new ways to evaluate how we're doing. We need to align the organization. We need to develop the strategy, deploy it, get people to buy in. We need to implement it, and then we need to evaluate it and test it and adapt it and re-envision it. So it's really more of a feedback loop. So once you're here, you'll sort of come back to the top. You'll see what's working, come back up here and go through it again. Employees are also environmental stakeholders. So employees are a key source for our environmental initiatives. I mean, they'll come up with it, they have to implement it. Our employees have to be on board with our sustainability initiatives. So some examples include reuse and recycling initiatives, reducing hazardous substances, coming up with more eco-efficient products and services, coming up with ways to use fewer resources or less energy. We also need to communicate our environmental commitment to our stakeholders. Remember, to everybody who has a stake in our business. There is a positive relationship between a firm's environmental disclosures and its financial performance, meaning that if you disclose your environmentally friendly policies, it should lead to a better financial performance. Firms with a medium level of financial performance had the highest incidences of environmental policies, meaning that firms that performed relatively well in the middle of the pack had some of the highest number, some of the highest incidences of environmental policies. Firms in this middle level, again, were usually environmentally committed, and then environmental disclosures help to enable positive benchmarking or metrics or targets. So environmental justice is this idea that we have that it's the systematic equal allocation of environmental benefits and burdens throughout our community. So the EPA looks at being environmentally friendly and having environmental equity, regardless of somebody's ethnicity, culture, or income. And where this comes from is in a lot of lower income areas or areas that have more minority populations tend to have higher degrees of pollution or maybe other less than ideal environmental initiatives. So the EPA has identified 4 activities. So they're conducting programs, policy, and activities that substantially affect human health and the environment in a manner that ensures fair treatment of all people, including minority and low-income populations. Ensure equal enforcement of protective environmental laws for all people, including minority and low-income populations. Ensuring greater public participation in the agency's development and implementation of environmental regulations and policies, and improving research and data collection for agency programs related to the health of and the environment of all people, including minority and low-income populations. So what they're trying to do is make sure that these environmentally friendly initiatives are not just done in highly affluent or only primarily white areas, that everybody is reaping the positive impacts of environmentally friendly decisions, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, income, etc. So environmental sustainability is the ability of an organization or country to protect the use of future resources, so of our natural resources, by maintaining and protecting the resources. So there's 3 components: a system to ensure sustainable management of natural resources, the development of social and institutional structures to support sustainable management and changes in the economic framework, So it would support the sustainable management of Earth's natural resources. And, even like number three, we know that there are government incentives to come up with more environmentally friendly products, processes, etc. Um, companies are, Ford is one company, Ford Motor Company is one company that specifically has um, a very specific strategy to help to eliminate fossil fuels and to become more, have more electric vehicles in their fleet. In fact, they have a commitment to actually reduce um, gas um, or vehicles that utilize gasoline. So, um, depending on where you live and what type of economy you have, sustainability priorities will vary. So, developed country economies like the US, UK, Australia are going to have probably more sustainability initiatives. Then you have emerging economies like China, Nigeria, India, and then they call them survival or third world. You might have heard like Madagascar, Eritrea, etc. And so, depending on whether it's developed, emerging, or survival, is going to impact what the sustainability initiatives are in that country. I'm sure you have heard about the greenhouse effect, and this is basically saying that greenhouse gases, which are natural, are out of balance, and more are being produced that can be absorbed than can be absorbed, and so global temperatures are rising. So we have cars, and normally our trees take the carbon dioxide that's emitted and they process it and turn it into oxygen. But we have more of these greenhouse gases than our environment can actually handle, and thus we have this idea, this concept of global warming. And so the Kyoto Treaty is a global treaty with voluntary commitments for reductions in greenhouse gases. And certain countries are members of this treaty. And so because of this global warming, we have climate change. And this climate change impacts weather patterns. It can impact, which will ultimately impact prices of insurance, real estate, agriculture, tourism. That can cause shifting. And then, so our processes and our product development needs to take into account climate changes. And a lot of companies you can see are trying to mitigate or reduce their negative impact on the earth so we can, reduce this or kind of control our global warming. So what are the effects of this climate change on our firms? Well, there's regulatory risks. You may have more regulation from governments. Supply chain risks, increased costs because of substitutions or compliance with regulations, lawsuits. We see lawsuits when there's, you know, people who are harming the environment. Reputational risks, right? And then physical risk, impacts of floods, droughts, climate change, etc. And so a lot of firms are starting to talk about their carbon footprint. In Patagonia, I'm sure you've heard of this brand. That's kind of outdoorsy athletic brand. Um, they are one of the companies that really is very transparent and communicates what their carbon footprint is, and their goal is to minimize their carbon footprint. And so the carbon footprint is the amount of carbon um, via GHG emissions that have been generated by a firm. And it's based on the total annual GHG emissions that are a direct result of the firm's operations. And it's divided into direct emissions controlled by the firm, indirect indirect emissions, and then all other categories. And so if you go to Patagonia's website, you can actually look at their commitment to reducing their carbon footprint. All right, that's all for today's mini lecture. If you have any questions, please contact me. Bye.